Hey everyone, I am so excited for our discussion today. It is on the topic of API security, particularly and specifically TSM and API security. And joining me for our conversation is Amit Jain, who is with VMware. Amit, how are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Amit, and maybe you could talk a little bit about this demo that you're going to give. It's on TCM and API security, and then we'll get right into it.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me. I'm currently working as part of Tanzu Service Mesh and leading the API security team. We are excited to release the new capabilities in TSM, and which are specifically targeted towards providing the API security to modern cloud-native applications. And today in my session, we'll go through some of these capabilities and a very brief preview of how these capabilities enables enterprises to provide advanced API layer security to their modern cloud-native applications.
So attacks are changing a lot. And so my question really to start is, why do we need API security? What is it about the changing behaviors that we're seeing that really force us to think about API security?
Yes, Alex, that's exactly the core of what we are doing. And as it is given, as you can see with the pandemic, Alex, that enterprises are going digital. And it is also given that enterprise applications are becoming cloud native and going multi-cloud. Now, as these enterprise applications are evolving into distributed microservices, they are becoming API driven. And so APIs are the actually glue that holds various components of these applications together and enable them to work as a single application. Now there are a couple of interactions or implications of these API-driven applications. First, as each service is now available over the network and providing API so that the other services can consume it, it becomes kind of vulnerable over the network. It is accepting the input from API calls and providing sensitive data as output. That makes the service vulnerable to attackers who can use APIs to connect to the service, and in some cases even can compromise the service with malformed API request. Secondly, application previously used to be monolithic, and they were exchanging the information within the memory, within the process boundary. Now that sensitive information is being exchanged over the network using these APIs. And what happens because of that is that APIs sort of exposes the data exfiltration risk. You can leak out sensitive information if you are not careful about your APIs from a security aspect. The third aspect is that APIs are being developed by development teams. And as they are being developed by development teams and are being released very frequently because development teams are trying to meet the evolving business needs, security teams often find it very challenging to review these APIs for security and compliance. And that basically, sometimes APIs can create some security blind spots. And finally, Alex, APIs are actually using application layer protocols such as REST, JSON, GraphQL, gRPC. And interestingly, most of the existing security controls are not even looking at this application layer protocols. So API traffic is practically evading all the existing security controls. Now, all of these makes it very important and very to secure your APIs. And given that the enterprise digital presence is mission critical, nowadays a business is only as secure as its cloud native apps and APIs. So that kind of makes it required for every enterprise to have a security strategy for being able to secure their APIs and cloud native apps.
How does Tanzu Service Mesh help with it? I know VMware has been developing a service mesh approach, and maybe you could explain what a service mesh is and how it works with APIs.
Yeah, so Alex, Service Mesh is sort of industry's response to this distributed microservices application. It's a distributed approach to adding the services and security to the application. And VMware's Tanzu Service Mesh is basically uses a distributed approach to provide services and security to modern cloud application. And to specifically demonstrate how TSM helps with the API security, I will cover three different aspects of TSM. One is the discovery aspect, where we discover all the APIs, all the services, and provide deep API layer observability into this distributed application. And then second is, how do we basically detect the advanced threats, and how do we alert admin and provide protection against these application layer, advanced application layer attacks and threats. And third part I would cover is that how TSM enables advanced security controls in the multi-cloud environment. So let me start with the first part, which is around discovery and security observability. So as we discussed, Alex, the first, most of the applications or APIs are being developed by development teams. And as they are developing, the security teams are not in loop. So now for the first thing, the security teams kind of face the challenge is that, how do I know what are the services active in my environment? How do I know which APIs are active in my environment? How do I know how these services are working together? Which APIs are they using? What type of information is being used over these APIs? And really, there is no single tool to do this across multiple clouds. So cloud providers have tools, but then they only work within the specific cloud. So as you go from one cloud to multiple cloud kind of architecture, how do you do it across all the clouds? And that's where the TSM comes into picture. So let me start with a brief demo. So we'll use an application which is an e-commerce application, Alex. This is basically a typical modern cloud native application which basically is deployed across multiple cloud. And under the hood, it is using multiple services which are working together to provide e-commerce experience to the end user. So as a user, I'm going to use this app. As I'm using this app, I'm using different services which are working together under the hood to provide this single e-commerce experience. And let's say if I want to buy the running shoes, I do the things like adding the shoes to the cart. And as I'm adding these items in the cart, the APIs are exchanging the information about what selection I'm making, things like my shipping information, things like what kind of shipping I'm choosing, and sometimes the sensitive information such as credit card. So let's say if we enter a purchase, if you want to make a purchase in this application and we use a credit card, this information is also being carried over the APIs, which kind of makes some of these APIs pretty sensitive from compliance aspect. And now as a user, I place the order, and that completes my application experience. Now let's see what happens behind the hood under the cloud when this application is being used. So this application is being deployed in two clusters. In this case, what you are seeing here is TSM dashboard. And as the application is deployed across two clusters, you can see the cluster view where one of the cluster is deployed in AWS cloud, and then the other one is deployed using Tanzu on-prem. So this is a multi-cloud, multi-cluster application, typical to what enterprises are doing nowadays, going multi-cloud and multi-cluster. Now, you can quickly see your cluster view here. You can see how your applications are behaving, which services are present in which cluster. And what is unique about TSM is we bring the concept of GNS, which we call global namespace. And what global namespace does, Alex, is that it provides you a seamless way of deploying your application across multiple cloud or multiple cluster. And it kind of abstract away the concept of cloud and concept of cluster and present your application from a security and observability point of view in a cloud agnostic and cluster agnostic manner. Now, as a security admin, you can quickly go inside the GNS and can see how your application is working. You can see the information such as who is talking to whom, and not only within a single cluster, but also across multiple clusters or multiple clouds. So you can quickly see the part of your services which are deployed on AWS, other part of your services which are deployed on-prem inside Tanzu cluster. And you can very quickly see the information such as RPS, error, latency, the operational and the health information of the services. But what is more interesting when it comes to security aspect of API is that TSM goes further and starts to learn about the APIs for each of these services. And that's where we start to differentiate ourselves, and we start to basically provide you the application and API security aspect of your application. You can quickly see how many APIs are active in your environment, how many APIs are provided by each service. And now let's say if you want to drill down into each of the service, you can drill down and you can see the APIs which are provided by a particular service. And on the high level, you can see the endpoint information. You can see the information for each of these APIs from operational point of view. And what is more important is you can easily see the compliance and security information for each of these APIs. Very quickly, you can see what APIs are providing by this service, which are the incoming APIs, which are the outgoing APIs from this service. And for each of these APIs, are we finding any sensitive information being exchanged? Are we finding any vulnerability being spotted in this API? And we'll cover this in detail in the subsequent part. Now, the other thing we do is that as we deploy ourselves into the application environment, we do what we call the API discovery. So TSM, when it activates itself into the multi-cloud environment, it starts to discover the services and all the APIs of those services. And this basically allows the security team to immediately gain the insight at the API layer. So they now, from a place where they were finding it difficult to know which service and which APIs are active in their environment, they can reach to this point very quickly to see all the services and all the APIs. And not only they can see the information about the API endpoint, they can actually see deeper schema of each of these endpoints. So TSM provides the not only the API endpoint discovery, it discovers the schema of these APIs and enabling the auto documentation and auto cataloging of the APIs in a very quick manner. And interestingly, what we also allow is that this information which we discover can be exported out from the TSM and can be exchanged in an open API compliant manner with the other teams. So security teams can take out this information. And in some of our customer deployments, Alex, we have seen that security teams have used this information and shared it with the other teams, such as pen testing team, to develop the deeper penetration test around their APIs. And they have also used this information to share it with the testing team to develop deeper interacting testing to around the API. So what it allows security team to do is that now they can not only go to the development team and talk about APIs and schema, what is running in the production, they can also validate that what is documented by the development team in terms of the schema is what is actually running in the production, giving them this deep API and application layer insights. We provide the analytics around each of these APIs. So security teams can also see how the APIs are working from a security aspect. They can quickly see what security events are happening on the APIs. They can quickly see the things like how the APIs are being used. Are there any errors happening? Which users are using these APIs? And as the things like GDPR and the privacy regulations are becoming more and more strict, even knowing the geolocation usage or geolocation aspect of the API is important. And TSM gives them this observability around how their API is being used, where it is being used from. Is there any sensitive information being exchanged? If it is, then which part of the world the sensitive information is being exchanged with? Are we finding any attacks and where are they coming from? And the things around compliance posture of the APIs and the security posture, in addition to the performance statistics.
So the question that I have is, what happens when you go to a new version of the service mesh, or what happens when the APIs you're working with get updated, which you don't really like to see because everyone expects the APIs to just work, but it does happen. So how do you work with these kinds of issues that really come up for end users?
That is correct, Alex. So what we do is that we track the APIs at the version level. So when we deploy the services in multi-cloud environment, we basically know the APIs information at a particular version level. And we can provide the diff. So we can give you this capability of knowing what changed. And what is more interesting is that we also do baselining of the application's behavior. So when we actually learn about application, we learn which services, which APIs, and what type of information is being exchanged. And you can actually put us into this alert mode where once the application behavior changed, so let's say if the development team has released a new version of the service or a new version of the API, we find that difference of the behavior and we analyze it to see if it is looking like a security issue or it is just a difference of the behavior. And we can give that notification to the security team. So that is another value add of the TSM where as the applications are being released very rapidly, security teams generally don't have a way to know if any behavior change of the application has happened. And TSM actually can bring that notification to the security team.
Great. So what else should we be knowing about API security just to finish up our demo here and discussion?
Yeah, so Alex, we basically go towards the, so we do the deeper API discovery, we do We do the deeper analytics, and we also go inside the payload. So another unique aspect of TSM is that we go inside the payload and we apply the pattern to find out if there is any sensitive information being exchanged. And that is very important because compliance regulations are becoming more strict, and security team needs to make sure that if there is any API which is exposing them to compliance risk, then they can apply proper compliance requirement and the controls on those services and APIs. So very quickly, security teams can come into the system and can find out if there is any sensitive information being exchanged. They can drill down about which API is exchanging it, and they can see specific transactions which are basically are involved in exchanging this information, giving them this auditing capability. So this first part is what we call the discovery part, where we discover your APIs, we discover your sensitive information. The second aspect of the security strategy is that, okay, now I know all my APIs, now I know all my sensitive data. How do I ensure that there is no application layer attack happening in my environment? How do I protect my APIs and my application against the application layer attack? And that is where the second aspect of the TSM comes into picture, where we do the threat detection. So we look at the application's payload and we look at the application behavior. We baseline application behavior and we use that to detect any anomalies. We analyze it to see if we are finding anything abnormal. We apply both signature-based policies as well as heuristic-based policies to detect if we are finding any abnormal activity in your application environment. And if we find any abnormal activity, we do this visual indication to the admins on the application graph. But we also provide this real-time event where they can get notified in the real time. And one of the cool thing about this event is that they are generated in a way that very quickly they can come into the system and they can analyze what is the blast radius of the attack looks like, what transaction was involved, which service was involved, what are the other events on that service. So that is the second part of the API security strategy, which is threat detection and protection. We also look into multiple type of risk. We look into things like lateral breach, shadow APIs, unusual service access. We look into is there any abnormal amount of AAA failures happening? We look into things like, are we seeing access from an abnormal country, abnormal state from a geofencing point of view, and creates a sort of like a application/API layer threat detection. So that is second aspect of the solution. And the third and the final aspect of the solution, Alex, is where it comes to the security enforcement. So one of the challenge with security team faces is that I have this applications which are deployed across multiple clouds. And now each of these, the cloud has their own security controls, but they are different. So now across the cloud, how do I basically apply unified security controls? How do I make sure that my security teams can apply consistent policies across multiple clouds? And not only that, the existing security controls are at the network layer. So now the challenge for the security team is that how do they apply the API layer or the application layer security controls across multiple cloud? And that is where the third part or the final part of the TSM value on the API security comes, is that we support deeper API layer security, which you can quickly configure in the system. And you can do the things like only allow certain type of PII, so that the API layer only allows certain type of access on the API layer based on the user ID, based on the schema validation of those APIs. And once you apply these policies, you configure them within the context of GNS. So what happens there is that once you apply the policy into GNS, it gets applied to your application in a cloud agnostic and cluster agnostic manner. So we
how do you know? How do you notify like the developer about any changes? And like there has to be some collaboration between security and the developer teams. How do you do that? Do you have a Git update that people see? Is it connected via Slack? How do you manage that communication?
Yes, Alex. So we support Slack. You can basically connect our events to the Slack, and that is one way. We are also looking to connect ourselves into the tools such as Jira and GitHub. Uh, we currently have the integration with the Slack and the things like PagerDuty and other SIM systems. But going forward, we are also exploring to connect ourselves with Jira, where if we find any API vulnerability, we can create a Jira ticket which can get triaged out and get assigned to the development team.
Yeah, because that's really critical, isn't it? I mean, it's going to be very difficult to manage this unless you have some programmatic updates.
Yeah, no, I agree, Alex. And I think we basically have designed ourselves to be a part of a CI/CD pipeline. Most of the policies we have are API driven, and we are very cognizant of the fact that the security is shifting left. So API security and application security has to be part of the CI/CD workflow. And any abnormality we find, any behavior change we find, we have to support integrations such as you brought up, such as GitHub, or being able to notify the development team.
Well, great. This has been really excellent. I know you're talking at KubeCon on why external interactions are so important. And your talk's going to focus on secure application access to external services. So looks like it's great. I guess just in conclusion, when you're thinking about TSM, how can one use this? How is this available?
Yeah, so Alex, this is a SaaS offering, so it's very easy to enable in any application environment. If you install a Kubernetes or if you install any EKS cluster, you bring your application there and you can very quickly enable TSM and connect it to TSM's SaaS controller, and it start to get API layer observability and API layer threat protection as well as security to secure your app, not only in a one single cloud environment, but across multiple cloud environments. So it's very, very easy to deploy. The solution is available right now. We announced the support of API security capabilities in TSM as TSM Enterprise in VMware, which was last week. And yeah, so anybody can simply try this out.
Well, Amit Jain, thank you so much for joining us. I've enjoyed our discussion. I've been here with Amit Jain of VMware. Amit, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you, Alex. Great talking to you, and thanks for having me.